Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Dr. Alan Donsky, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and especially because of the speaker we have tonight. This presentation is put on by Wellness Through Mindfulness, a group that's been going about 7 years. And the aim of the group was to present mindfulness and related topics freely to the community here in Calgary. We do have a website, www.The Breath Project. There's a lot of this info in the chat room already. And we do presentations every 2 weeks or so through the courtesy of the public library. And in particular, we want to thank Patrick Mealy and Maya Milovic, our hosts this evening, for their tremendous support over the last couple of years and their ongoing support. We are not a commercial organization in any way. None of the speakers are paid for their time or their services. And so we are basically a non-registered charity, but we certainly welcome donations, and that a donation site can be found, or a link on the website. And we do have ongoing expenses related to the upkeep of the website. So any donation, even a couple of dollars, is always welcome. And we really appreciate that in support of the program. I'd like to spend a couple of moments just outlining what's coming up. And I think it also gives a good overview as an introduction to Dr. Badri Rickhi. We've been living in unique times over the last 2 years, and we've all gone through the phases of anxiety and uncertainty. What surfaced in the last couple of years, in particular related to anxiety, has been grief. And a lot of people have lost a lot of things at many levels. And so in 2 weeks' time, I'm actually doing a presentation on befriending grief. How can we meet grief? How can we learn from grief? How can it actually help us grow? 2 weeks after that, on May the 19th, all this information's on the website. We are having a wonderful talk by a Qigong practitioner, Monira Jiwa, and her topic is on transforming emotional and physical pain with Qigong. Again, a real integrated approach to really looking at the whole person and what it means to be human, looking at energy. 2 weeks after that, on June the 2nd, we are fortunate to have Dr. Linda Carlson, who's been famous through her work in mindfulness and applying it to cancer patients at the Tom Baker Cancer Center, and is an authority and a wonderful speaker and has a tremendous research background as well. And her topic is on life-threatening illness as a catalyst to live your best life. So again, leaning into these tough things as a way of opening a door mindfully to potential growth. We're also sponsoring and putting on, and it's not on the website yet, but will probably be there in the next week, a half-day retreat on Saturday, June the 4th in the morning till noon. And we've titled it Mindfulness, Burning Bright or Burning Out. And again, one of the things people are feeling at this time is a lot of burnout. So we're offering something about a mindful approach to burning brightly rather than burning out. We have a disclaimer as well that the intention of these sessions is to provide education. They're not intended to be supportive or in any way for specific personal issues that people have. And as such, the speakers and the format of the presentation are not designed to provide specific guidance or professional care or treatment for any kind of distress or disorder. So we ask participants to limit your questions to the topic presented or to any mindfulness related topic. To the talk for tonight, Badri Rickhi and I go back 29 years, and I was a junior trainee in psychiatry back in 1992. And the first time I met Badri, I was rather interested in Badri's very broad view of the world and his very broad perspective on health. And Badri left mainstream healthcare system many years ago because he wanted to start up something in the community that was more inclusive of complementary and alternative medicine. So in regards to the CAM, complementary and alternatives, Badri in 2009, after graduating from, he started off, he grew up in Trinidad, went to medical school in Jamaica, went to do psychiatry in Canada, Toronto. And in 2009, he was awarded Dr. Rogers Prize, which is an international prize for people who really advance the practice and dissemination and advocacy of integrative complementary alternative medicine. Badri has studied not only as a psychiatrist, but he has studied Indian medicine, Tibetan medicine, Japanese medicine, Ayurvedic, and really is a broad practitioner in all these areas. He was the first Canadian to sit on the steering committee of what's called the consortium, which is the academic consortium for integrative medicine and health. And in 2002, started a charitable organization, the Canadian Institute of Natural and Integrative Medicine, CINIM. And they developed initially, and before I got associated there, a breathing room program called the Breathing Room. And it's an online mental health program for youth and young adults. It's won various awards. It's been acknowledged as a leader of online mental health and is available to 80,000 Canadians at the moment. It was also adopted a year and a half ago by the government of Canada as part of their programming on the Integrative Wellness Together Canada website, WTC. Badri's also started up another charity in regards to working for mental health programming for addictions and substance use and making it really much more available to people, a lot of online programming. And lastly, Badri also, in keeping with his broad world view and background, Badri's also been involved with a hospital in southern India, the Sri Narayani Hospital and Research Center in southern India. Badri might be one of those people who I would invite you to listen to with a number of different ears this evening. Badri operates on a number, I call them Badri's frequencies, that Badri can be saying something cognitively or rationally using words, but he's also using a different kind of languaging. And so Badri is very much tuning into heart, into spirit. He's tuning into what it means to be a human being. He knows a lot about energy fields and energy work. And so if you find yourself not quite, if your brain is not quite getting what Badri's saying, I would invite you to drop below the neck and just let the words seep in at another level. It's a bit like trying to have a couple of radio stations on at the same time. And I find that very helpful in the 29 years that I've known him in order to benefit maximally from what Badri has to teach us. So as a colleague, as a collaborator, as a former student, Badri, in your role as an ongoing mentor and a friend, welcome and thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Alan. First of all, I want to thank everyone for showing this evening. It's a great honor to know that people would be interested in what I have to say. I want to sort of set the scene, and Alan made a statement about speaking at different levels. So I'll try to be as simple as I can, because it's something that people tell me. For example, the staff at CINIM says that I say something, they get Alan to translate it so it makes sense to them. So hopefully we won't be going through that sort of situation. Now, the thing I want to talk about is that this presentation is not to supersede any of your own approaches to your own journey in spirituality. everyone has their own unique journey, and you've got to honor that. And folks like myself will just come up with different ideas to get you thinking, or maybe fill some part of the puzzle in for you so that it makes your journey more effortless and hopefully more fruitful. So I'm not, I hope you understand that I'm not speaking as some sort of guru, because I'm also on my journey and trying to learn. And from what I have learned with people I work with friends, and everybody, what I try to do is glean a little of what they have been saying in their struggles and trying to put together some concepts just for people to play with and see, does it fit for me? Does it make sense? If it doesn't make sense, that's fine. If I use the example of the story of the 6 blind beggars and the elephant, most of you will know it, but there's this story that they took 6 blind elephant beggars and they had them touch an elephant from a different position, and each one described the elephant differently. Same elephant, and they described it differently. And what I've observed in spiritual practice is each one of us are somewhere around that elephant. And we really work on the territory that we are facing on that elephant. But I'd like to do is have all of us move around the elephant a little and then try and come up with some new concepts which may or may not fit for you. So the other thing I want to say is that I have asked people over and over, including myself, what is it that helps me to understand that I am on the spiritual path? With the world is filled with so much pain and suffering. And as Buddha says, you know, we're born into pain and suffering in this reality. And there's so many good people with good intentions who are struggling. And if any one of us could come up with little cues that would be helpful together, working, helping one another, lift ourselves up, perhaps we can get better traction from what the world is presenting in our reality at this moment. So what I was struggling with and what was part of the discussion was, we know that our brain is rewiring itself. I work with a group of astrophysicists and quantum physicists and neuropsychologists, and we look at the role of consciousness, and we're using equipment now that was created by NASA to look at consciousness and how it fills our body. It's in its infancy, but there are a few things that we know is that the brain is adapting. We call it brain plasticity. And other ways are, and we are approaching life, spirituality, and all the different qualities that make us human in different ways. And in spirituality, for me, what I've found is, although that there are tools, whether it's pranayama for your breath, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's mantras, whether it's yoga, whether it's whatever form we take, qigong or anything like that, that they are tools. And how do we know that they're working? And what are we hoping to accomplish? And I ask people at different times, how do you know that your spiritual journey is improving? Or what are you hoping to achieve? And like myself, a lot of the time it has been, well, I hope to achieve peace. I hope to understand karma. I hope to be able to love my fellow person, etc. And we all have gone through that language. So what I thought I would do today is present some concepts that I've gleaned from my own journey, but also from other people like Dr. Donsky in his mindfulness work and others, about what sort of things happen on the spiritual path that makes us understand that we are moving along on our journey. And secondly, what, are there on those pieces of the puzzle, are there techniques or approaches that we could add to our armamentarium of tools that we use that would be helpful in accelerating this process? And use them if you can. And if you can't, that's fine. The other thing is that we have put together, as Satsinem and my professional corporation, we have put together over close to 100 short videos that many of you have seen, but they deal with some of the topics that I'm talking about, and I'm sure that it will come up on the screen at some time. It's free. Please feel free to use it, and it will expand the thinking. And hopefully we did it for everybody to share, and hopefully you'll be able to go on. We'd love if you like any of the presentations, you click the like button. And without further ado, I'll start with talking about some concepts, just 5 concepts that I think are very important for spirituality. Now, let's see. My hope is we could get the screen on. And Alan, is my screen on there?
Not yet, Badri.
Is my PowerPoint on? I see it on my...
Not yet, no.
I see it on mine. Nothing on yet?
The green button on the share screen at the bottom of your video picture, Badri.
Okay.
You click on that.
Okay.
And then one of the windows will show your PowerPoint, and then you click on that, and then you click share.
Okay, I'm just trying to get off this. So there's a let me take that off again and share screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you look,
Yeah,
one of the little, right, and then click on it, and it will be circled, highlighted, and then press the share button.
Okay, did that.
The blue share button. There we go. There we go. Okay. So now, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then there you go. You got it.
Okay, super. What I want to talk about is what I call the 5 vital truths that I've noticed that is very important for how we approach or understand spirituality or our journey into spirituality. And I'll just mention what they are and go into them in detail. One is understanding flow. The second is being aware of the lies we tell ourselves. The third, and I'll explore these further. If this is the answer, what is the question? The other, slipping into the bardo, and what we call going from here to nowhere. So let's start with the concept of flow. We all know, we've all gone through experiences where things are just flowing smoothly for us. And we accomplish a lot more, and we feel good, we feel positive, but somehow that flow stops. And one of the things that I've observed about spiritual practices is that the spiritual practice becomes way, way more effective if you are able to recognize when you're in the flow and when you're not in the flow. So I think if I use an example in music of this young man who is trying to get into the flow, loses the flow, then the flow changes a little. And you will think about yourselves, how many times things have been flowing for you and all of a sudden something will come and stop. But I can't quite tell what I'm hoping for. Somehow, maybe now I'll find the words to say. Never thought I'd see the day. Yeah. Sleeping slip has begun to fray. I never thought I'd see the He loses the flow and tries to get it back. Highest hunter stops stalking prey. I never thought I'd see the day. I think the concept of flow, if I could describe it further, we always are aware when we are in flow. But somehow when we're not in flow, we lose that connection with ourselves. And this is where, for example, mindfulness is a great tool to get back into your flow. And so one of the things that helps us on our spiritual journey is being aware when we're in the flow and when we're not in the flow. Now, what happens is there is always a flow going on. So just imagine you're in a canoe in a river and you're flowing around with the current and you come across a tree that's blocking the passage. Now, a lot of us as human beings, and we've been taught, we got to face and crash through the obstacle, break it down. And this takes a lot of time and effort. And even in spirituality, sometimes I find for me that I've been very good at pranayama and getting good results. And then all of a sudden, it just is not flowing. Now, all the literature and all the teachers have told me, just keep at it. You've got to discipline yourself. And for some people, that works. For me, it doesn't. Because what I do is I look, that river is flowing somewhere around the tree. I look at where the flow could be, and then I take it. Because if you get the flow, you can go around the tree and be on the other side, unless you keep pushing through because you think that it's the only door that's open to you. So one of the thoughts that I have found, and I've worked with people, is just cueing at different times of the day. Is my flow going on? Am I in the flow or am I not? And if I'm not in the flow, I ask myself, where do I think my flow is? And you would be surprised, after a while, it may simply be phone a friend. It may simply be, for me, it may simply be don't spend your time trying to complete dictations at the moment. Do something else. Because I find that when I am in the flow, I achieve so much more. And I'm so connected and I'm energized and I'm not drained. And when I'm not in the flow, it's a really painful and disappointing place to be. So the first suggestion on your path, whatever tools you use, is pay attention to your flow. And there will be times like the young man when he lost the flow, and then you noticed his rhythm came up differently, that look for something else that intuitively feels might flow for you at that moment. And that may be the side current to take you around that tree and back into the stream again. So today I'm just going to be scanning and give an overview because I want to leave enough time for questions. But flow, I have found, is really, really important in our spiritual journey. And it becomes way more efficient because we become so critical of ourselves when we get out of the flow. We think we've done something wrong. Now, one of the other things, spirituality is about really knowing yourself and knowing the truth about you. And one of the things we all do, whether we call it rationalizing or whatever, is the lies we tell ourselves. So besides flow, if we pay attention to how we fool ourselves, we will find that we do it so frequently, and we need to be transparent with ourselves. We don't have to share it with anyone. The ultimate truth is the truth to ourselves. And I'll use an example. I had a situation where there was this wealthy businessman who would give to charity and he would give to different projects, but he would be very, very abusive to women. And, some of us knew that, and we decided that we would not work with him because of that. And one of the people, she was very strong about not participating in that relationship. And then after a while, she was approached about doing a project by his group, and she would be paid very generously for it. And she took the project, and her comment was, "Oh, I will make some money off him so he can't take advantage of me." Whereas anybody looking on will see, whether we call it rationalizing or anything like that, we are fooling ourselves into believing something so that we could have an agenda fulfilled, whether it be finances or otherwise. On the other hand, one of my really close friends over many years, he taught me with his example about how to be aware of not being dishonest with oneself. And I'm talking about John Kabat-Zinn, who I consider the father of Western mindfulness. And John was one of our mentors in the consortium of the academic health systems, because he wanted academic centers like Harvard and Yale and everybody to have programs that would allow mindfulness and meditations and things like that. And one of my colleagues at the University of New Jersey, he got some really good funding to hold a conference, and we needed a keynote speaker. And so he approached John Kabat-Zinn at a very generous speaking honorarium and asked him to be the keynote speaker. And we knew John is really passionate about these things. And John's reply was, "I am so honored. This honorarium is very generous, but it is not feeling right. It does not flow for me. It is not something that I would be doing that would be very truthful to myself." And we could all be John Kabat-Zinn's. It's just how we face ourselves and how we try not to be dishonest with us ourselves. So with flow and being aware of how we fool ourselves, and there are times we won't recognize it, but ultimately, the more we practice it, it will become like muscle memory in our mind, and we'll know, no, 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 I shouldn't be saying that. I'm manipulating the situation if I make this statement. I'm trying to impress if I make this statement. And so honesty to oneself is really important on the road to spirituality. It does not require tools of pranayama or anything like that. It just recognizes truth and self-perception. So there is flow, there's the lies we tell ourselves. And the next one, which is very interesting, if this is the answer, what is the question? So many things happen. And when we face a tragedy, or we face a crisis, or we face something in our lives that is creating an issue, what we tend to do as human beings is we take the problem and we say, okay, how do we solve it? And then we build up a plan to solve that problem. But what we do not pay attention to is what people have said over and over, is that something happened in the past that created this issue at this time. At this time, what we're facing is not a problem, but it is an answer to some issue that in the past we were struggling with. And we come across it, and it happens in so many different ways. Just recently, I decided to go to Walmart. This is just about 10 days ago. And I was going to get some razors, and I had seen the advertising about Harry's razors, which are quite cheap, and I got at Walmart. So I turned up at the Harry's razors, and there was a shopping cart just blocking the area of the razors. So there was a lady wandering around, and I thought, I'm not going to touch the shopping cart because I don't want to upset anybody. I'm just going to sit quietly. And you know what? I'll do some mindfulness, and I'll do some meditation, and I'll do some inner work. I have time. So I stood back and I was doing it, waiting for the lady to move her cart, which she did eventually. And I don't think she had a cue that I was waiting just to see what was on the shelf. Now, I had on my list razors, headphones, and there was something else. So I headed to the section for headphones, and I'm looking at headphones, and all of a sudden I hear, and it's the same lady, and she says quite loudly, "Why are you following me around? Are you stalking me?" Now, my first response would be, oh my God, how do I solve this? Do I challenge? We all know what gets triggers within us. And I told myself, I said, I've got to figure this out. This is the answer to something that was planted some time ago that I need to understand. Now, all of us, what we create today manifests in the future. So what is manifesting today was created sometime in the past. And I asked myself, this is the answer to something. What was the question that triggered this answer some time ago? Now, I have no idea at this point in time. I don't know. My head can get in the way and say that, it could be racist or I don't know what, but it isn't. It might be something else. And so instead of engaging with the woman, I was grateful that she somehow presented me with an answer that I would need to look at the question. And I just encourage you from time to time, when you hit a crisis or you hit a success, just tell yourself, okay, this is the answer to something. The seeds were sown sometime before. I wonder what was the question at that time. And so as we begin to fill that in now, you will notice again, it doesn't involve pranayama or yoga or anything like that, because spirituality is ultimately understanding the journey within oneself and the dynamics that take place within us. So for me, I find that it's very helpful, and it's something that we do not think about generally. Now, this is a very interesting concept, slipping into the bardo, and I'll try and describe what I mean by the bardo. The bardo, if in medicine they teach us that when I am looking at the screen at the moment, that what's happening is that it's not pure light. It's the receptors in my eyes are switching on and off. So it's light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. But what happens is I see enough light to see an image. But there is a space between each little bolt of light. And the Buddhists and Hindus talk about the bardo. And the bardo is getting into that space between consciousness as they come in little packets of quantum, bang, space, bang, space, bang, space, bang, space. And trying to understand how you could slip into the bardo is a really, really different experience. So let me sort of explain in a layperson's terms a general idea. Imagine you're in a cinema and you're looking at the screen. And for those of you who have ever looked at things like America's Got Talent or Canada's Got Talent or whatever, and what happens is you're looking at the screen and all of a sudden you see lights and images appearing on the screen and beautiful sceneries and things are taking place and it's telling a story. And then at the end of it, out come all these people from behind the screen with lamps on their heads and everything. And they were choreographing the whole thing that was manifesting on the screen. And so slipping into the bardo is the ability not only to sit on this side of the screen and see how our reality plays out, but be able to slip through some of those cracks. And what you see is the whole interaction of how the universal consciousness is playing out your reality that will manifest in your life. And the beautiful part of it is when you could slip just into those spaces and get behind those scenes. Since it's about you and it's about your reality, you can change whatever is coming to you rather than waiting for it to happen. In the series on the cosmicgame.com that you would have seen, hopefully, there is a series called Dreams and Spirituality. They're very short clips from 3 to 5 minutes. And in there, I present a technique that I learned when I was doing dream therapy and when I was doing my Buddhist, my Tibetan medicine, where they teach you to slip into that space so that once you're able to get in, you can see your whole life as all the different dynamics are coming together to manifest it into reality. How your thoughts, your actions, and everything like that. And you have the ability to just think about changing it and it will change because it's what's happening within you. So slipping into the bardo, I know that I'm not presenting it in a totally clear way, but if you look at dreams and spirituality, hopefully it will help you understand things some more or clearer. Now, in slipping into the bardo, I'll just play this so you get an idea of what we're talking about. Now, you would be really surprised sometimes at how art imitates life. It won't be exactly in bold technicolor like what you saw, but you will see the interaction of energies and consciousnesses and all that that's taking place behind that screen of life or that veil that's manifesting. And it's being driven by our thoughts, by our emotions, by little things, the grudges we carry, and all that. We affect the whole consciousness in that area. Now, the last one I would like to touch on is the concept of going from here to nowhere. And again, there are small video clips in the Cosmic Games series where I talk about the concept of nirvana and samadhi. And they talk about the consciousness as that which is manifested, which is the everything, and that is which is not manifested as yet, which is the no thing or the nothingness. And that nirvana, in its true explanation, is when you experience everything, you become part of everything. And that is where most people think the end point of spirituality is. It is where you become part of everything. You are one. You're no different from the atoms in the pillow or anything like that. And I know that experience because I've had that experience. But there is also an experience beyond that, which is where you become nothing. You have no experience at all. And again, mindfulness really helps us to cut down on the chatter of recognizing that our mind is so busy that we need to control it so that we can go into the no thing. So I'll use an example of an experience that happened to me that I shared with Alan. One night, about 6 weeks ago, or a little more, I woke up during the night and I had no thoughts in my head. Now, it's hard to describe because it's beyond logic. And no thoughts in my head. I was just aware of being. I had no idea. I wasn't thinking. So I had no concept of my name, where I was, or anything. I was just being. And this is a state that people fight for centuries or lifetimes to achieve, where you can empty the mind of everything and your mind can be filled with nothing. Just be present in the wonder of the divine, if even that's a concept. And then a voice came to me, and the voice said, what is it you want to know? And instead of thinking, oh my gosh, am I in samadhi or sort of things like that, the first question I asked myself was, am I having a stroke? And immediately I was allowed to just go through a mental status examination, checked how my concentration was. And when I look back on it, I think, God, you went for the dumbest thing that was possible. But it is what happened. And then when I was aware that I was not having a stroke, I could sit back and be in that nothingness. And then things would just come. And it was like looking at a title in a book. And when you read the title of the book, you knew everything in the book. It was like that. It was effortless. It was the things that I normally worry about. I had no concern. Now, I have to tell you, I do not have the skills of getting back there. It happened. It was an experience. I hope it happens again. I'll work on things. But one of the things about spirituality is that we need to silence our mind, because when we empty ourselves, the universal consciousness really fills us. So I usually like to leave time for people to ask questions, because one of the biggest problems I find is that the authority who comes with PowerPoints and presents up to the last minute takes away the opportunity to interact and to share thoughts and ideas. So if I were to summarize what I was trying to do today, the first thing for anybody who came on late is, one, I am not here to challenge all the tools that are so valuable that we use to help understand the human experience and better ourselves. All I am doing is sharing some concepts and ideas, which if you can pay attention to on a daily basis, it just keeps reminding you as you're interacting during the day. Am I telling a lie to myself? Am I manipulating? Am I in the flow? Is my head too full? Do I need to do some mindfulness? Do I need to get from here to nowhere, where things are so much less, so I can empty this cup in my brain that's so full and overflowing, as it has been for the last few years, and just allow consciousness to flow in? Am I able to do those things? Am I able to look at a crisis at this point in time? This crisis just did not start in this moment. The seeds were planted sometime before, but people teach us, you got a crisis, you got to plan how to deal with it. Well, if you understand and you can disarm and you can change the whole concept, what was the question that happened that allowed this answer to take place? Because once you disarm this answer, there is no need for the universe to try and bring it back to you and keep bringing it back to you until you understand it. So all I'm trying to do today is just share thoughts, experiences, pieces of the puzzle, so that hopefully all of us who are working so hard to be on that spiritual path, that we are able to just add one or two extra little tools that do not require a lot of effort. It just requires commitment that will help us understand where we are on our journey, how our journey is going, the insights and the understanding that will take place as we go along on that journey. And hopefully, when that door opens for each one of us, it's only us who goes through because it's our path. And hopefully it will become more efficient and be able to help us to be more successful on that journey. I'll stop there now and leave it for Alan to try and help me put some context to it.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, as always, Badri. I've heard you talk about these 5 truths, these 5 invitations to look at things in a different way. I've heard this before, and what was interesting for me tonight was, and I typed as I was going along to bring it to the mindfulness in the chat room. I've sort of summarized each of your steps, was at the end there to be in that awareness and that letting go and that going nowhere. And in fact, that ties in with a lot of the talks we've had in the mindfulness in these presentations, where the work of mindfulness is actually to be fully present in the moment, to get out of this old stories, the ruts we have in our head, and to sort of drop in and to be fully present. And in fact, that last one actually then ties back to flow, which was where you started. So there's actually a circularity there, and you can make these connections back to each other. So they're not necessarily in an order, but in fact, they're almost circular. That as I let go of those ego-driven stories and what I believe myself to be, I can open myself up more in the human realm, the heart realm, the spiritual realm, the soul realm, whatever language you want to use, the space or divinity or connection or whatever. And that, in fact, is just a pathway to the path where we transcend ourselves. We get to beyond the ego. Anyway, those are comments. There are some questions, Badri. This is wonderful. Going back, somebody asked you, Bud, about the lady in the Walmart. So, so how did you respond? And did you ever know what your question was about why you stood there and why she got annoyed with you? Has an answer arrived to, or has the question arrived to you, the answer of that strange interaction you had with her?
The answer is no, I haven't fully understood, because the biggest struggle really is the battle is my intellect, because I can come up with so many different possibilities. But then this is where, as you say, the lies I tell myself, I have to be careful, because I could say, oh, here's the brown guy with the mask on standing there, and here's a Caucasian. I could make it racist. I could make it whatever, you know. But I know that if I empty my mind, the answer will come. That I can feel that, I can almost taste the answer, if I could say that. But in that case, I have not figured figured it out as well. But I gave the example because I wanted people to know, if you keep practicing and being patient, all of a sudden, when you're not paying attention, the answer will come. Not sometimes when you're looking for it and the flow hits and bang, in will come the answer. And what is helpful is because once you understand it in a very truthful way, the universe does not have to play it back to you in another form again so that you finally get it. And that's one of the problems. You know, Alan, we have what we call syndrome shifts. In the 80s, it was bulimia and anorexia. Then it was depression. And now it's anxiety, and then it'll be obsessive compulsive behavior and all that. Were we curing people of bulimia and anorexia, or was it just shifting to something else until we finally get the answer? And it's one of the things we really need to be careful of, because once the head and the ego gets in the way and starts creating an answer that we fool ourselves with, then what happens is it happens again and again. And the thing is really getting into that silence and letting the truth come to us. That's the closest I could explain it at this time.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll add a comment in, Badri. I think a lot of us feel that we don't want to go there. We don't want to, we're not used to being in silence. We don't want to go in for two reasons. And there may be people who've heard me talk about this in the past. The first reason is if we go in there, it's very uncomfortable. There's doubt, there's uncertainty, there's judgment, which you mentioned, there's self-criticism, there's pain, there's grief, which I'm talking about in 2 weeks. So we don't want to go in there. And then the second reason we don't want to go in there, even if we have the courage to go in, is often people don't have the tools to know what to do with that. I call it the yucky stuff. We don't know what to do with the yucky stuff. But the mind doesn't know what to do with the yucky stuff. But if we drop it below the neck, we can get into flows which are operating on other levels. Our humanity, our heart, our compassion, our forgiveness, our patience, our tolerance of uncertainty, our forgiveness, and so forth. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, yes. I think if I could describe, the first thing I felt was an intense sense of shame and guilt. You know, like, what did I do? And so that sort of almost cripples you. You get stuck. But I remember thinking, where's my flow? And my flow said, just keep moving along the aisles. I moved along the aisles. And of course, 2 aisles later, who should come barreling through with her cart but the same lady again? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, here, you know, what the heck is happening type of thing. But I kept saying, where's the flow? And the second thing, Alan, is that I told myself that I have to be careful not to become angry with the person, not to make it their issue, not to blame, but really to get into myself. And again, in the references on the Cosmic Game, there's a chapter which is totally free for everybody on forgiveness, which is a really powerful chapter on forgiveness. So what I did, any resentment that I felt towards this woman, because, quotes, she was showing me up, and she said it quite loudly in the aisle, that I was starting to resent. I was starting to become angry, because after the guilt and the shame, you know, comes this protective demeanor, armor of anger and self-righteousness and everything. And so I decided I have to take responsibility. I cannot put that dirty, as you say, stuff out there into the universe. We have enough of that away. So I kept, my flow said, do forgiveness, do forgiveness, do forgiveness. And I did it. And when the flow stopped, I stopped and looked for another flow again. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, yes. And it's a lovely lead to the next question, Badri. And I know you'll have some thoughts on this. So there's a question here: is loss of flow why we may find ourselves depressed?
If loss of flow?
Is loss of flow why we sometimes find ourselves depressed? Is the absence of flow a contributor to depression or keeps it going? Or
I agree. I think a loss of flow, we all respond to it in different ways. Okay. And some people who are not going through, remember, there are other crises going on in our lives. There are other answers that are happening to us at this time that we don't even have a time to look at what was the question that created these answers. And yes, I come from a family that has had severe depressions. And I remember in my first year in residency, when I saw what psychiatry was teaching me, I became depressed because I thought, oh my God, am I going to have to practice this? That, hold a tool over people who are needy. I wasn't in my flow. I think whenever you're in the flow, if I could describe what's in the flow, I could say from that, when you're in the flow, things go smoothly. I find, for example, that if I have a task, I finish it much quicker. I accomplish a lot more and everything. And when you're not in the flow, everything else happens. That lady threw me out of my flow. I was actually thinking of being patient and being mindful and non-judgmental. And she threw it at me and I knocked me right out of my flow. Guilt, shame, whatever. Those things I believe happens when we are not in flow.
yeah, I have. We've got a couple of ideas and some more questions and comments are coming in here, Badri. That's great. Thank you. There's a recommendation of a book called I'm Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani.
Yes.
And if you've heard of that, might be of interest. She also has a website describing her experience and interpretation of it. Tell us a bit about her, Badri. You know, or you've heard of her. Dying to Be Me.
I know of her. I
Yeah.
don't know specifically about that, so wouldn't be really competent to
Right.
talk about that specifically. But the question really is who is the me? Is the me, what society says I am? Carl Jung talks about the persona that we put on, and then the parts we're ashamed of that we hide. And behind all that is just the most beautiful essence of what humanity can be. And when to get to that, we got to face all these other things that happens, that takes place around us. I know Anita, I've read some of her work and things like that, and I really enjoy her work, but that specific one I would be unable to comment on.
Yeah. It's a lovely title. I haven't heard of it, but Dying to Be Me. In fact, it echoes what you said, Badri, that we've got all these old stories that we hang on to about who we are in the world and status and money or positions or academics or jobs or neighborhoods or what car we drive, whatever, etc. And so, in fact, a lot of people say that the spiritual path is dying to the old self, like a snake that sheds its skin. The snake is often a symbol of life because it sheds its skin to be born again and grow. So we actually need to die unto ourselves in order to be who we're going to become. And what gets us stuck is if we're not in the flow, if we're fighting that flow of where we're moving. It's always interesting when I moderate, just seeing how one comment flows into another.
Yeah.
So here's another question, exactly following on. How do we move beyond identification with our sense of self? That sense of self that limits our capacity to touch the silence, to touch the stillness, and to become unconditioned. How do we move beyond identification with the sense of self that's so limiting and to open to that deeper space?
Yeah, I think initially it's a bit hard. It's just being aware of the games we play with ourselves and just starting small, because I mentioned to people, you start with a small nudge, because if I give a practical example, I am somebody who is very difficult to get into the flow to exercise. And so I started with just doing one squat. And then over a period of time, I'm doing 50 squats and 60 squats. Um, I can only speak from a personal example. I try to monitor me and try to observe me. And a lot of times things get away, and I try not to be so critical as I have been before, and still continue to be at times. But just be aware. So, for example, Alan, when I'm with a client, I am always asking myself when I talk to them, am I saying this to manipulate them? Am I saying this to impress them? Am I saying this, and you describe it beautifully, from below the neck, coming from the heart, that is just filled with non-judgment? And I think the first thing that I look at is the amount of judgments that I make. And a lot of them are selfish judgments. They help protect me, or they help me seem better or anything. Just start wherever you can and just find one little toehold in and just love that place and just start clearing that up. And then another will show and another will show. Don't give up, because everything that starts coming up, you will know when you've been doing therapy with people, that all of a sudden things that are buried for years start coming up. We just got to remove one at a time and leave space for the other one to come up. And there's no formula that does it. It's just what works for you, what's the flow that works for you at that time that allows that to happen.
Which is a perfect lead in, and I'll come back because I'm going with the flow of where the comments are taking us. We have an offering of Hilda Smith has offered to read us a poem on self-love from a book she published a few months back. And so, Maya, I'm just wondering if Hilda has a capacity to unmute herself and read us this poem on self-love, because it's very timely about the forgiveness we need to give ourselves for judging ourselves or judging others.
I think
Hilda, please go ahead. You are. There you go.
Thank you. Badri Rickhi, Lenny Smith is my husband.
I know.
And
Hilda.
I saw you on, and my heart just leapt up. You and Annette will have to get together after.
Yes,
to everyone here, thank you, especially to Alan and to Phil for doing wellness. I'm honored to be here. My book just came up for 2 Cover Awards. I am so stoked. When you spoke of the moment where you were totally into no thing, I thought of one thing, and I won't take much time, but many, many years ago, I was going through some family things, and I had the privilege of seeing Badri Rickhi to talk about this inner feeling that was going on that wouldn't go away. And I remember telling him how much I wanted to touch the lives of millions. I'm a daughter of 2 survivors of the Holocaust, and I grew up to do many things. And I remember dear Bud saying to me to just settle and to know that what I was doing was enough. And I shared many things about art, music, teaching, family. 2 years ago, when Dr. Lorraine Shiba came to me and asked me to write this book of poetry, inspirations, and meditations with art and music in it, little did I know that I would have a moment, as Bud described, where I had had several months ago, last year yet, a moment where I totally disappeared, but I was very present on my bed. I felt like I wasn't even breathing, but I wasn't scared. And I felt absolutely nothing. And it was an amazing feeling that I discussed with a friend who's a psychologist. I'm going to call him to ask him to tell me exactly when we had that conversation. But the reason I asked to be unmuted is in Chassia's Enchantment, I wrote every poem with love. I have my own things, as every human being does, as a teacher, a writer, a painter, having come to some of your classes. and being a teacher with Deepak Chopra, as well as being Canada's first internationally certified prana yoga teacher from the schools in India, schools opened by Swami Vignanananda. This poem, True Self-Love, I offer it to all of you. I read my own poems as well as the great masters like Hafiz and Rumi and Chaucer's work. True self-love. True self-love is not selfish. To care for our whole self, every part of us is necessary to feel whole. In nourishing and nurturing our mind with knowledge, wisdom, creativity, enlightenment, in honoring our bodies with movement, nourishment, exercise, intimacy, sound and healthful touch, in honoring our spirits with nature, precious books, stories, and shared love. We live the selflessness of love, more ready to share it all in joy and with gratitude. True self-love reminds us of the other as they are, but a reflection of us, whole, fully. Thank you for this moment, Alan and Bud.
Thank you, Hilda. And you forgot to mention you have a beautiful voice as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Next time, Alan, one day you and I will speak about perhaps a presentation of soul inner work that relates to the science and the spirit of what you all have to offer. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Hilda. So far this evening, and we still have got a quarter of an hour left for more reflections, conversations. I think Badri set the tone this evening really well for really every now and again, we just step back and we feel the flow. So Badri's flow, his energy, his work, he obviously taps into many, many different fields and disciplines. Badri speaks from the heart. He speaks with his heart. And so we've had this evening, we've had a talk, we've had reflective moments of silence. Badri showed videos, and Hilda's read a beautiful poem, all of which I want to, at this point, really say that this is the sort of space that mindfulness opens up. This is that mindfulness, as John Kabat-Zinn, moment to moment, which is about flow. On purpose, we set certain intention to be present for our lives, whatever's showing up, without judgment, as Badri said, or criticism. And then somehow we have a sense of peace. There's less, and I'm feeling it certainly this evening, there's less conflict between the different stories in my head. There's a certain harmonic. There's a certain understanding of that we bump up against ourselves. We bump up against grief. As Badri said, you on a river and you bump up against a tree. Hilda speaks about when we go in there, we actually begin to open up to ourselves and to offer ourselves the very things that we've been looking for. So comfort and ease and kindness and compassion. And all of this, the doorway in, which as some of you have heard, this is really what mindfulness can be about. That it brings us into these other doorways and openings. And each person's path is individual, each person's path is different. Badri, just a question. What can help people? Have you got any additional ideas? And you've given us a lot this evening in the five truths. Any idea, what's your understanding about, any other ideas about why people may get stuck, or why they may doubt the spiritual path, or the value of going inwards, or the fears or the worries they have? Any additional comments to the ones that you have? Because I know you've got you have a lot of wells that you can draw water from.
Sure. I think that if I even focus on the science, that what it's saying is that we are losing ourselves and we are becoming more trapped in cultural expectations. And one of the things that happens when we get so much coming at us all the time, that we try to deal with things, or let me step back a little. Everything for me that starts with me starts internally, and then it becomes interpersonal. So for example, Alan, if you and I are having a conversation that's interpersonal, and then cultural, what's happening in society. What I think has happened is that we have sort of fractionated what takes place internally and separated it from what takes place interpersonally and culturally. Now, interpersonally and culturally has a lot more to do with the ego and the expectations and everything like that. And internally has become, as Buddha said, full of pain and suffering, that we want a respite. We kind of move away from there and try to correct things around us. Now, the question is, what we get stuck. And one of the things, again, in one of the audio books that we have there, is how to become unstuck. And I think what happens is that when we become stuck, we sort of try and create some linear path and plan in our mind as to what an outcome should be. And then we work towards that. And everybody knows in life that a lot of times what we think should happen doesn't generally happen. So it circles back and makes us lose faith and confidence. For me, when I am stuck, I first of all acknowledge that I am stuck. And then I do what I call one diversion. So one diversion, let us say, Alan, that you had asked me, we preparing one of the projects on cinema, and you asked me to edit a story, right? That's an end result, and I'm stuck trying to figure out how to edit the story. If I create one diversion, like just take a line or something, and just decide, I'm going to just do that line, do something to get unstuck, because we feel that we move from stuck to accomplishing something. So if we create a little diversion by making one small change, and then when we get stuck there, we make one more small change and one small change, then what happens is that we no longer back in that space where we are stuck, but we don't have an expectation of the outcome. What we're doing is we're working at just making small changes without expectation of an outcome. And then all of a sudden, we're so far away from where we were stuck and not moving that we get some sort of momentum or back in the flow again. Now, I know I'm talking about it in an abstract way, but if, for example, with our breathing room program that has done so well, we started with an idea and we didn't have the money to do it. We didn't have the resources. We had to go through a scientific review and an ethics review committee. And it was tough because the scientific review committee, I had a study on Prozac that went through quicker than a study on spirituality for depression. And because people were thinking, well, is there going to be a cult in this? Is it going to brainwash people and things like that? So we were stuck. We were genuinely stuck in how do we move forward? And then what we decided was we would just create one little change. And that one little change was meeting with a group of people and just running the idea by them. So if I extrapolate that in life, sometimes when we get struck, maybe just talk to somebody, not somebody who will agree with you. Just talk to somebody who will be gentle, but will be truthful, And if we talk to that person, we can no longer be stuck where we are, because they'll put thoughts in our head that already get us going somewhere else and keep moving from being stuck. And then all of a sudden we'll find that we have the momentum. Don't try to come up with an outcome that is successful at those times.
Yeah, you can't force it, in other words. Yeah. I have a reflection, and then there's another question, Bud. And the comment is that perhaps the Walmart lady was being given an answer to something that she needed to be working on, and for playing a supportive role in her life. So we will never know if she was responding to trauma, if she felt you were invading her space or whatever, but she may not know that you were in some way an invitation for her to look at her reactivity. And of course, we're not, taking sides or anything, but turning it around, it reminds me that, this comment, we're always interacting with each other. And so this capacity to watch our inner world, which is what mindfulness is about as well, to watch my reactivity to you, to watch your reactivity to me, is always informative.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. When I was going through the process, I had to forget about the me. It was an interpersonal, interactive thing. And I remember, I don't know what was happening to her, because basically all of us, we're really trying to be happy. Our delivery systems may suck in certain areas, but basically we just want to be happy. And we don't know what trauma or anything is taking place. If I could give a quick example of a situation that happened to me when one day I was driving to work, and I kind of do my meditation depending on what's around. So I had decided that at every traffic light that I hit, that everybody who crossed the red light in front of my car were going to get blessed, whether they liked it or not. And so I would keep blessing them and blessing them and blessing them. And all of a sudden, I get this message that there is a woman who is going to be hurt, right? I just get this crazy message, but it's that type of message that you got to listen to. And I immediately started pleading with the man and sending love and asking not to please let go. And then I felt this sense of peace. Now, there's no way that, you can't get into your head and say it's the imagination or anything like that. Now, 2 months later, I get a consult. And in comes this lady, and I automatically know this is the lady that I prayed for. And I asked her, how is her marriage and everything? And she said, great. And, all the answers didn't fit with what my experience was. And at the end, we had a little extra time like we have now, and we were talking. And she started telling me, she said, something strange happened 2 months ago. She said, I was in a very abusive relationship. And she said, this man came up to me, my husband came up to me, and she said, I really thought he was going to kill me that day. And she said, I saw the look on his eyes, and then all of a sudden, he just stopped. And she said, since then, he has treated me so kindly and so nice. That's why when you asked, I told you my marriage was fine, but it wasn't. Now, the thing about it, the reflection was, it could be, oh, what a great person I am, I did that, so and so. I didn't do a thing. I was grateful to the universe to allow me to do something. And all of us, if we're just grateful to the universe to allow us to serve it in a way that's compassionate and kind, we will change what's taking place.
Perfect. And there's another question, and in the interest of time, Badri, we've got just 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
There's a question here from Don, which I'm happy to sort of, Don and I know each other quite well. And so Don says, if mindfulness promotes finding the space in between those conscious moments, is it possible that accessing it is to be found in the gap after the exhale, where the body is most settled? And Don, you're absolutely right, of course, Don. Your intuition there says that and we know this, that when we exhale, our relaxed system, the vagus system, the parasympathetic nervous system, calms us down, it restores balance. And you can even feel it in the muscles. As you breathe in, your chest opens up and you tense. And then as you breathe out, and it is all part of this relaxing into. And in those moments, and that's why a lot of breath work, pranayama, qigong, getting ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally ready to create the circumstances in which we can flow. And so absolutely, Don, there's one more message at the bottom. There's lots of thank yous, Badri, for this evening's talk and for all your wisdom and opening up and really supporting people individually on the path without being prescriptive. There's lots of references. I hope people have been scrolling up and down. Maya's been adding things. Badri, I want to just thank you again for a wonderful, wonderful
Thanks, Alan.
talk. Yes, of course, please.
Very quickly with the breath
Of
and
course.
what you speak, and particularly for Don. The ancient Saint Krishnamacharya talked about prana, and he talked about the breath as the breath comes in and it stays in the body, and as it leaves. And this is something that when I'm doing my breathing, that Krishnamacharya suggested. He said, when you're breathing in, prana is the life-giving force. When that breath stops, that's when we die. And as you breathe in, you say, the divine approaches me. As you hold the breath within yourself, you say that the divine is within me, and you feel that. And as you breathe out, you're actually expelling your prana. I approach the divine. And maybe it would be helpful for Don to just add that sometime, or somebody, and it helps make the whole concept of the breathing so much more fun.
Thank you so much, Badri. Thank you, thank you. I'm just looking at the bottom. Love the parallels that bring me to E equals MC squared. And Don, that's it, that ultimately, matter is energy, energy is matter. And to be able to tap into these spiritual energies, these physical energies, we are a physical manifestation, but we also have consciousness. We have a thing called mind. And again, to link it back to the central theme of all these talks and why we do this so openly for everyone, that mindfulness brings us into the present moment to open. It's the doorway into the clarity of seeing that we're much more than just our old story. We're much more than just the titles we have in the world out there. So once again, Badri, thank you very much. Maya, you may want to have the last word or two.
Thank you.
The talks are recorded. The talks will be on the website. Lots of good upcoming talks. Stay tuned on the website for the retreat on June the 4th. Hilda, thank you for your poetry. Beautifully read. And yeah, that's it for me for tonight. So Maya, any final comments or thoughts?